Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Catalyst After Town Hall. Today, with the DripDropz team, we are talking Mind the Gap. So it's all about technical gap analysis. We're looking for those places in a system where you can find an opportunity, where you can take your idea and move your idea in a way that it would benefit others and grow a business for yourself. So this is an interesting topic, and it's one that entrepreneurs really need to kind of embrace and kind of find a way to do it. I can, in my entrepreneurial journey, I built a small farm, but we built that small farm out of finding a gap. That's exactly what we did. It was during the pandemic. There was food getting plowed back into the ground. There was no way for farmers to get the food to market. And so we saw an opportunity at first just to grow for ourselves, but then we realized that there was a real business opportunity in that, where not only could we grow for ourselves, but we could teach others to grow for themselves. And so that's one way that we located a gap and filled it. And it's been successful for us up to this point. DripDropz also filled a really incredible gap, right? We started out, if you know the Cardano blockchain, you know that min UTXO is required to pass with every transaction. So every time you send tokens to others, you have to attach ADA to it. So the way that DripDropz filled a gap was we found a way to offer tokens to people that they could bring their own min UTXO and put their own min UTXO into the transaction to get their tokens back. So that's what today's topic's. It's a good topic. This is a lot of fun. There's a lot of good information and a lot of ways we can enjoy and can build from it. So that's the opening question today. If you've built a business before, did you find a gap? And what was the gap you found, and how'd you fill it?
I'm just trying to build a business. Don't look at me.
So you're trying to build is this your first business you're building?
Well, technically not the first, but all previous failed. So um, it's first. What I'm building right now is a sidechain SDK for Cardano. It's not a business per se right now, but hopefully it will become one. So the gap here is that Cardano is a blockchain, and there are myriad other blockchains, and they all have modern blockchains have smart contracts, but most of them are written in a language that is foreign to existing developers. So this sidechain SDK that I'm building focuses on how do we bring the developers to build on blockchain, but using their expertise, using language that they already know. So they don't need to learn Solidity or Haskell for that matter. They just need to be able to know JavaScript or Java, and write their smart contracts in or Python in that language.
Right. So the gap that you're filling is that you're finding ways that you can give people access to the blockchain without necessarily having to learn a new language.
Yes.
That's the gap you're looking to fill. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, I'm trying to find a way for Cardano to, as we are a small pond in an island, to uh, uh, find a pathway from the pond into the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of
Excellent.
enterprise software developers.
Right. So, and Anthony, I know you've maybe told this story once or twice before, but you found some gaps too early on, right? When you were moving from when early days, Bitcoin days, and when Cardano was first forming, right? You found some gaps that you filled as well. Might have lost him. How about anyone else in the room? Anybody? Well, we'll see if Anthony comes back. But anybody else in the room?
Sure.
Shale.
I'll talk. Hi, my name's Shale. I'm with a project called MADAO, Mutual Aid DAO, MADAO. And we were in project. We applied Catalyst Fund 7, Fund 8. We didn't get funded, so we sort of scratched our heads and said maybe this isn't the funding route for us. Now we're trying to get funding through nonprofit organizations. We're trying to be a second layer cryptocurrency on the Cardano chain that is based on a basic income, and we're differentiated from other basic income coins because I saw what they weren't doing, which was connecting their coin to a real boots on the ground economy. Like people who need a basic income. I've done basic income advocacy for much longer than crypto stuff, and I've got an anti-poverty background from a little bit before this. Nothing crazy. By that, I don't mean I have accolades. I just mean I'm doing podcasts and organizing and stuff. Anyway, so we are trying to create a basic income that people will use to simply buy goods and services from each other that they can provide each other, a sort of modern monetary theory, basic income cryptocurrency, because there are places in first world nations as well as third world nations where people just have no money. Like if I have a broken window and my neighbor is a carpenter, they can come fix my window. But if I can't pay them, I guess carpenter might, if they have the ability to replace the glass, but I can't pay them, then it doesn't get done. And we're in this situation where the money, sort of stops too close to where it starts. It doesn't trickle down to the people who need it. So we're trying to solve that. That is the gap we're trying to fill, And again, the difference between us and other basic income cryptocurrencies is that there doesn't seem to be much you can do with them. So we're trying to solve that issue first and foremost. We've had a lot of difficulty getting funded. We're still not funded, so it's been a very slow bit of development. We've sort of become a community currency with the people on our Discord exchanging our token informally on our own just spreadsheet. We're not on the chain yet. We still have not been able to fund it. We have a Haskell developer, but because we can't really pay him, we're his last priority, and we've been at it for about a year now. So that's me. I thought I'd come in, just say hello to the community. It's been a long time since I've done anything with Catalyst, and it's good to be connected and to know people in the broader Cardano community. And I just want to say it's great to end up with someone from DripDropz because I have a ridiculous amount of Hosky token weighing down my Yoroi wallet, and it's completely your fault. So you owe me one, buddy. No,
glad you're finding some good use for DripDropz.
Yeah, it's nice to meet someone responsible for something I'm familiar with. So hello.
Nice to see you too, Shale. Appreciate you coming today. And so I hear from you that the gap you're trying to fill is a person to person exchange, right? That's
exactly
that's the gap you're trying to fill. So that's
like crypto as real money, like on the most basic economic level.
Absolutely. Very cool. Well, I do wish you luck. I hope that you guys can find a funding route that works for you.
Thank you.
These are that's kind of the cool thing with crypto is it's really opening the opportunities for people to find places that they can. So today we're talking Mind the Gap. We've had a couple examples so far of gaps that we've filled. If anybody else has a gap that they want to talk about that they filled in their businesses before, Nathaniel, you'd like to give yours a shot?
Yeah. Thank you very much. This is the first time I'm joining this breakout room specifically, but then I think I didn't know what it's about. But I like the introduction and I felt like I'm at the right place, kind of.
Great.
So Mind Gap has to do with the informal businesses in Africa. I realized that most of the businesses, but then if you come to the African economy, most of the businesses are within the informal sector that are not registered. They are run by individuals. You have a lot of sole proprietorship businesses running that's like are connected to most of the livelihoods they are really the engine of growth in Africa. But because of poor record keeping, and less documentation. They don't really get formalized.
We might be losing some of your video there, Nathaniel. You might want to turn off your video to keep talking to see if it'll help
they
you.
are mostly cut out. They do a pool, like pool contribution, and then they use it to fund one person, so the cycle of the pool ends. So I realized that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Nathaniel. Looks like we're losing your signal with your video on. So you might, if you maybe if you cut your video.
Let me turn it off. Okay,
you'll probably get your audio better
now. Okay, so I identified this gap, and I felt blockchain can help bring this activities using the smart contracts. And so in this funding round, we presented like proposals, and I created this non-profits, as we call it, Ubuntu Origins Africa, to bring some of these activities in the informal sector using the blockchain to kind of create a trustless system for them. Using a smart contract to bring their activities in a very in one place that it can profit them. So first of all, we will use it to help them with bookkeeping, that they can do that's a tool that will give them for bookkeeping, and also use it for like a smart contracts that will help give them credit support at a very low interest rates. I think in the proposal that was submitted, it was around 1%, because they can borrow from banks. They can borrow from banks, like, because they don't have any collateral. So we want to use the smart contract to help them to be able to. So I think it's one of the sector that really employs people. If I think the current statistics, if you take Ghana, for instance, it employs almost about 94% of people in the economy. But it is, because it's not formalized, people don't really pay attention to the informal sector that much.
That's the informal. Nathaniel, that's the informal economy. There is 94%.
Yeah, it employs a lot of people. We have the private. We have the private sector is into two parts. We have the private formal part, and then the private informal. Now, majority of employment goes to people who are employed in the private informal sector. That sector doesn't really get development. The best the government do to that sector is to identify ways to tax them, because they call them the shadow economy, but they don't do anything to help develop them. But they really want to find ways and means to tax them. And so that's the government. It's a really huge. It's not peculiar to Ghana alone. In Africa, in Africa, the informal economy really employs a lot of people, but they don't get much support when it comes to private sector development. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nathaniel. Appreciate that. Some great insight from your community there. It is very interesting to see, and yes, there are massive gaps there because the infrastructure is just being built to allow you guys to do all this. This is amazing that you're able to take blockchain and do the things that you're able to do with it. But where there was no infrastructure, now there'll be infrastructure, and it's transparent and immutable. This is awesome. So I'm glad to hear that. So again, today we're talking mind the gap. We're talking about finding gaps in places like in a blockchain, where there might be some technology that needs to be built, or some tooling that needs to be built, or whatever, maybe a service, something like what Shale was talking about, where it could, there's potentially some services that could be exchanged, and finding ways to allow that cooperation between two parties that don't necessarily know each other, but exchange the value between them. So this is a great environment that we can play around in as entrepreneurs, right? And so today I'm just kind of asking, if you've got an entrepreneur story of where you found a gap that you filled, so if anybody else has a gap that they'd like to talk about that they filled, let's hear.
I can talk about our story if anybody's
curious. Please do, Pi. That'd be great.
Yeah. So for those that don't know me, I'm Pi from Sunday Swap. This is my first time joining one of these. The DripDropz folks invited me, so thank you for inviting me. But I think that the story of Sunday Swap has largely been one of filling gaps and helping others fill gaps. when smart contracts launched on Cardano, everybody outside who had kind of Cardano's poor interests at heart was saying, well, where are the dApps? Where are the dApps? And because we launched Cardano native tokens so much earlier than smart contracts, there was this pent up demand for that kind of fundamental DeFi primitive of, I have a token, I want to give you a token, or I have a token and I want a different token, right? And DripDropz has their own role in that story for projects distributing tokens. And so SundaySwap, we tried to fill that role of how do we allow in kind of a fair and dynamic manner people to exchange these tokens. Additionally, our launch was pretty rough, and I'll be the first one to admit that. We put the network through its paces, and in the spirit of Mind the Gap, I think we helped a lot of kind of pieces of the Cardano infrastructure identify where their gaps were, right? Wallets got a lot more robust because of the excitement and the demand that we generated. And as much as it generated bad optics for us, I'm super happy that we launched when we did, because the Cardano blockchain is in a much, much better place because of it. And then the kind of third way that we try to mind the gap is identifying gaps in understanding. And I think one of I hate talking good about myself, but I think one feedback I get personally is that I'm really good at explaining highly technical concepts in a really approachable way that isn't condescending and that kind of really gets at the heart of the matter. And so I'm always on the lookout for, if everybody starts saying that Cardano supports 1 transaction per second, how do we, okay, there's a kernel of truth in there, in that I don't want to say poorly, but a kind of naively designed dApp can exhibit those properties. And so let's kind of break that down for people. And so, that's like the gap in knowledge that different people have. We really try to kind of be a purveyor of that and narrow that gap.
Excellent. Yeah, and I appreciate that. That's a different way of looking at finding the gaps, and that's a great way to look at it, because and I think that holds true also if you're trying to build something new. If you do see a knowledge gap where you maybe have some knowledge about something that maybe the community doesn't, that could be a space where you can fill a gap with a business. Right?
Yeah, thank you, Pi. Lloyd, I'd like to touch on something.
Sure, of course, Rick.
Your volume's a little low, Rick.
Yeah, you're a little quiet, Rick. If you can bring it up a little.
Better? Okay.
Oh, much better, yes.
All right, cool. Thank you. Yeah, so sometimes we each have our fields of expertise, and Pi's story is a great example. They were a first out the gate, right? And it's always the first guy out the gate gets killed, right? Because that's what happens. That's just how it is, because you're exploring new territory, right? And so in the big scheme of things, if you do a gap analysis of Cardano, you say, what do we need? Well, we want to reach millions of users. And how do we do that, right? And right now, and then what you do is you start with the big picture in mind, and then work your way back to your skills and what can I do for Cardano in order to deliver something that bridges that gap. So if the big picture is you want to reach millions of users and you start working your way back, you'll start finding the pain points, and there's where your gaps are. And this is what I recommend. I think Project Catalyst, prior to going into Fund 9, before people even submit proposals, is there should be a gap analysis to say, what do we need? We don't know what we need, and so the gap analysis helps you identify what you need. So if I start with, okay, we want millions of users onboarded onto Cardano, and I work my way back, what's the first pain point I run into? Well, the first pain point is the user interface. Okay, right now, there's very few and far between wallets. That wallet is your viewport into the blockchain. That wallet that goes on your mobile device or that web browser plugin, that's your viewport into Web3. Everything else is a Web 2 facilitator to get you to Web 3. First thing you run into is the UI UX. Good example is Project Catalyst UX itself, but let's stick to real world apps that people actually want to go out and play with. And that is, if I want to connect to a website that provides a product or service, that website's going to need to have a connect wallet button. No, right now on my phone, I did a demo with Kyle and Lloyd earlier this morning when we were working on stuff. And that is, right now I can do pretty good with Flint Wallet, for example. I can open Flint Wallet. I can go to a website, navigate Connect Wallet, and connect inside Flint. And I can start to interact and make purchases, trades, whatever, through that particular wallet. Other wallets have other solutions. They're filling the gap by putting like a dApp store in there where it has certain connectors where you can click on the product or service they offer and it will let you connect inside a mobile device. And the reason I emphasize mobile devices, the web browser side, we got kind of figured out pretty well, not just DripDropz, but the Cardano ecosystem in general. But there's a massive number of people using mobile devices to connect to the internet. Most people look at the glowing rectangle all day and they're not sitting in front of a desktop computer. And if you can make that easier and reduce the friction for that user to get to the dApp product or service that they're trying to use, that will help fill that gap and allow them to use the crypto better. And then once we solve that in the context of the cryptocurrency space, by using things like the Sunday swap, where I can go through the wallet on my mobile and connect, and the JPEG stores and all those other places, we solve that with crypto. And then, well, there's another gap. Things like PayPal. PayPal's accepted through a whole bunch. I'm not trying to sell PayPal. I have no affiliation with PayPal. There's a massive marketplace access through PayPal. And there's a gap there. And if you can bridge that gap through Flint Wallet or Eternal Wallet over to PayPal, and then that way I'm staying inside the same app on my phone and I'm navigating what I want to use and interact with, and I can do all my business right there on my mobile device. And that's pretty cool. And that would also fill a gap. So bridging to the legacy financial systems also fills a gap. And then you say, wow, what happens when we get to millions of users? Well, earlier this year, before there were any network parameter adjustments, when Pi launched Sunday Swap, the network parameters were set much lower than they are today. Okay, so when he launched it and everyone was like, oh my gosh, we have a toy to play with. And I went in there and I went in full degen mode on Sunday Swap. Guess what happened? The blockchain started to slow down. And guess what? The knuckleheads over DripDropz launched DripDropz and people went full degen mode and it slowed down even more. So now we got a throughput. We got another gap. We need more speed.
Just a heads up, we speak freely here, man.
Sorry.
I forget. I liked what Richard was saying, so
it's true.
Wait until he finishes.
No, it's true. I know the thing started to slow down. You know, we know there was some chain bogging. Everybody started to have banners on their websites that say estimated deliveries maybe 3 hours to a day. I remember Pi called that long before they launched. He said, "Yeah, you can see a delay delays up to 24 hours or something like that."
Well, the peak delay for Sunday Swap was 9 days.
Yeah. Wow. And there were various factors. Some factors this, some factors something else.
Yeah.
And these are all gaps that need to be filled, and that's speed and throughput. So you reach out to these millions of users with all these cool things you just built and realize it's slowed down again.
Well, we learned something. We learned stuff the IO engineers didn't know about transaction discrimination, large transaction discrimination.
Right.
So.
Yeah, they didn't know that. We had to figure it out the hard way.
I had two thoughts that kind of dovetail on what Rick was saying.
Please.
So the first one in the UI, here's like an upcoming gap that I've been, and let me take my hand down, that I've been kind of terrified of, that I think is immediately going to throw a huge wrench in the usability of Cardano, but I think crypto in general. And you're kind of starting to see it, but I think it's going to get so much dramatically worse as Cardano really focuses on that interoperability story, because you're going to start seeing, and you are starting to see, the same, like different tokens that represent the same underlying asset in an exponential explosion of different ways, right? So you're already seeing, like right now we see different stable coins which represent $1. And so they're different stable coins and people don't understand what the difference between them is. And now as you start to have bridges between chains, well, there's going to be multiple companies that want a piece of that pie and that want, to run their bridge. And so when you bridge that token through a specific bridge, it's going to have a different policy than a different token. So now you're going to have even, like Ethereum bridged to Cardano has multiple different representations. But now what about if I bridge my Ethereum to Cardano and then to Nervos and then to Ethereum and then to Cardano, right? Now that's like 6 layers of wrapping. And every single smart contract, if I want to like accept payment in Ethereum, needs to understand how to do that unwrapping, or at least the user interface that we're presenting to someone, like either needs to automatically kind of unwind that wrapping for you to the correct token for whatever you're interfacing with, or we're just gonna, you're gonna have a wallet with, it's kind of similar in my mind to if you do like a bunch of trading, you'll end up with dust in a bunch of different wallets that like it's not worth the money to like get it out. And so like we're going to see kind of a similar phenomenon with tokens, right? You're going to have like 20 different tokens that all represent the same thing, and the end user is just going to be like, I just want to buy a cup of coffee, and is not going to be able to do it. And so I'm terrified of that. And similarly, as we look, Cardano in particular, I think it's focusing big on the layer 2 solution. And we haven't seen many plays in that space yet. The Hydra team is building up Hydra. I think there's going to be a diversity of solutions there. And I'm particularly worried if the wallets treat layer 2s as another network, right? And you open up your wallet and you have to switch, same way you switch from mainnet to one of the test nets, preview or something like that. That's going to be a nightmare for people to, oh, I'm interacting with Sunday Swap, so I need to switch to this layer 2. And then I go over to, whatever MinSwap chooses for their layer 2, and I have to, switch out. So from a user experience perspective, I think it's really important for us to mind the gap between the technical underpinnings and the experience that we want to build. And anytime you have a difference there, you have to balance the impedance mismatch of like, okay, well, if you're not telling the user what's actually going on, you're going to have these corner cases you have to handle. But if you exactly represent what's going on, you're going to drive away all but the most technical of users. So that's something that keeps me up at night. And then the second thing that Rick was talking about was the performance gap. And so I think another really important thing that we as a community need to do is make sure that we're minding the gap in people's expectations around these improvements. Because, we saw this with the Alonzo hard fork, where we launched smart contracts, and smart contracts were technically possible on Cardano. And it was built up for so long that there was this expectation that as soon as smart contracts launched, boom, DeFi, right? And we saw it took a little bit of time for people to learn how to use the system and build out the tools and build out the products and things like that. And I think, there's a chance that the same thing happens with the Vassal hard fork. The Vassal hard fork that's coming up in a couple of days brings huge scalability improvements to Cardano. It's really exciting. But it's also not going to be a switch that's flipped that all of a sudden every protocol can do 50 transactions in a batch, right? And so we need to start kind of closing this gap between, yes, Cardano can make steady improvements, and this like regular cadence of improvements is going to pay dividends over time. But with every single one, you need to expect some kind of delay in adoption. And so that's another thought that what Rick was saying caused me to have, that I thought I'd share with people.
Yeah, appreciate that, Pi. And yes, I mean, I can kind of relate some of this stuff going back to the early to mid 90s, when the way we were building on, Windows was just becoming a thing, right? Like we had Windows 3.11 for work groups, and we had WinSock to get on the internet. That was it. Like that was the only way that you could get on the internet. So a gap that I found back in the early 90s was I found a way to write an installer that would install WinSock on Windows 3.1 for work groups. And we built an ISP out of that. Early 90s. So there you go. You can build businesses when there's a gap of knowledge, a gap of experience. When there's not enough tooling, you can this is an opportunity. So, and that's thankfully what we're talking about today is trying to find these opportunities. And Pi, you just laid out some really great opportunities for people if they're interested in filling gaps in this space. And it can be as little as writing up, documentation, writing, making videos, making, information to give people, or as much as a whole new product that fills these gaps. I got to tell you, the wrapped versus, wrapped and then wrapped again and wrapped 4 other times. It's like ordering hash browns from Waffle House, smothered, covered, chunked, chopped and dashed and diced and, everything else. Like that's, that's,
Yeah, the good
That's
thing is
what
we
we're
have
getting.
native assets building USD, for example, on Cardano, and that's very fortunate. There's many different organizations who are building that out, which is awesome.
So
And
Binance
Pi
or you
shout out,
realize-
with my left hand, I just connected my Flint wallet to SundaySwap with my left hand.
So,
Legion mode.
Yeah, and by the
in
way,
addition to gaps in businesses and opportunities, there's also gaps that we see that we need to build, for Cardano, right? In the roadmap, there could be certain things that may need to be in place to enable certain types of applications and things like that. And from that perspective, Pi and even Sebastian, if you wanted to come talk, you guys are probably some of the best in the world at seeing some of those gaps that I've seen. And obviously, there's some things you guys may not be able to talk about if you're working on some stuff, but I understand that as well. But all I'm getting is that at some point, more than one entity is going to be building out Cardano. It's not always going to be IO, and we as a community need to recognize what needs to be built so that we can ensure that gets funded properly.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, Andrew.
And things
So-
like roll-ups too. I think Sebastian might be able to speak to that. Hey, Andrew,
Hello.
as well, because the ones I was getting at, the gaps I was looking at was the user interface, millions of users, user interface gaps, sluggishness in the blockchain, and that brings you to throughput. How much throughput can you get on the blockchain? As Pi indicated, you got Hydra layer 2 solutions, but also
You probably nailed it. with
roll-ups
those.
is also an option as well for community to build out that gap.
Well, the UX is interesting. The UX interoperability with just dealing with all these swapped and wrapped tokens, or wrapped tokens, probably the more appropriate term. I can see how nasty that can get. The wallets just not really know what's going on, and maybe people are coming up with weird vectors to trick the wallets. Who knows what's going on? It could get a little wild and definitely not usable. And to grow outwards, we need to get easier. It needs to get more simplified for consumers, or for the everyday person being their own custodian. It all needs to become more, I would say, streamlined, but we're getting there slowly. It's going to take time though. We're way early. So Andrew, what do you guys see as any kind of like gaps in things or technologies that we might want to start focusing on as a community that we need to get built? There's a lot of push for a side chain on Yorm at one point in time, and so there's things that we necessarily don't have.
Yeah, I think a lot of the work that Santiago has been doing with the Rust framework and all those libraries is huge. We really need something other than a Haskell node, even if the first Rust node is just like, I think there's a Catalyst proposal for a data only relay. I think that's a very big deal. The current node is not optimized for apps. It's not optimized for querying by address. And that's something that a data only node built in Rust would be really, really good at. And that, that can help shove the chain around to all the other relays a lot faster than these clunky Haskell nodes that have to have all of this stake pool information on, can't do. A highly optimized Rust implementation of the node is, I think, critical to the next phase of dApp growth on Cardano. So vote for Santiago's proposal.
yeah, I agree with that. If I can talk on my side as well, for our side, we have this rollup that we're deploying on Algorand. It's on mainnet, or sorry, testnet currently. It'll be on mainnet probably this week or next week. The reason we can have it on Algorand first is because there's not really a good way to build a rollup on Cardano right now. And Vassal makes that slightly better, but not really to the point where making a rollup is an easy experience. The reason why is because Cardano is optimized for data unavailability. It's extremely hard to put data on the layer 1, whereas the entire concept of rollups is to put data on the layer 1. So you're kind of doing the opposite of what Cardano is optimized for.
I'm less familiar with Algorand. Can you elaborate on what about Algorand makes that a lot easier?
Yeah, Algorand supports. So there's 3 things that makes Algorand easier for this. One is you can add up to 16 kilobytes of data per batch, which is fairly high. And this in itself is not so different from Cardano because Cardano also has 16 kilobyte transactions. But the difference is that block times on Algorand are 4.5 seconds and they have instant finality as well. And then, so this makes that you basically get 5 times the throughput compared to Cardano because 4.5 versus 20 seconds. So you would get about 5 times. And then you don't have to worry about rollbacks either, which also causes delays as well. And on top of all of this, Cardano does not have any kind of transaction prioritization. And as we saw during the Sunday Swap launch, it's possible for the blockchain to get to a point where there can be a few hours between you sending a transaction and getting approved. And this is disastrous for rollups because it means if there's a 3-hour gap between posting the new rollup state, the entire rollup freezes for 3 hours. And so if we say our onboarding strategy for users, the next 10,000 users, 100,000 users, million users will be on rollup on layer 2, we can't say like, oh, sorry, million users on layer 2, you can't do anything because we're waiting for random Joe Schmo to buy his coffee on layer 1. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
Well,
so the gap is
obviously
getting to
users-
layer 2. Getting layer 2 sorted. And
Yep.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things we can do to improve layer 2s, specifically the rollup kind of layer 2. So obviously Hydra does not really have this issue. So there's different kinds of layer 2s that work very differently, that have different trade-offs. So, to improve this kind of rollup type of layer 2, I think the key things that will be helpful is, one, making it a version of Ouroboros with fast finality. So obviously we can never get instant finality. We're not a BFT blockchain. But right now the finality on Cardano is fairly slow. And it is possible to make it faster. In fact, what Ethereum is working on right now is, basically proof of stake with both a Nakamoto consensus and a BFT consensus kind of combined together. So they're doing something similar in that regard. And we can definitely take that approach. And Aglos has talked about, this being possible with Cardano as well. We just haven't invested the time into it. But that's to help a lot with just rollups because I'm going to say, okay, this data is on the layer 1, it's finalized, it'll never change. And that makes our lives a lot easier. We can also think about how do we handle data, right? Because right now, if you've looked into Mithril, so Mithril is an initiative from IOG where they basically want to have stake-weighted snapshots of the state of the blockchain created by stake pool operators every epoch, which helps a lot for trustless syncing for like clients and just proving state of the blockchain in general. The problem with Mithril certificates is that they're megabytes in size. So we can't just put the Mithril certificate in a transaction. And so the solution is like, okay, well, we'll have, this kind of data shared between stake pools in some way, and they'll run the Mithril node, and you can connect this kind of like peer-to-peer network over the Mithril nodes. But this is like the same infrastructure we need for like this layer 2, which also has a lot of data. The same infrastructure we need for like metadata for other use cases, potentially NFTs, potentially stake pool metadata. Like all these kinds of metadata solutions end up with the same kind of problem, which is like, how do we get this data without polluting the layer 1? And the reason nobody's really done this so far is because cryptographically, there was no good solution to this historically. We're with the growth of zero knowledge proofs and other kinds of cryptography, we're finally getting to the point where this is now something that is tractable, that can be tackled. And if you look at the Ethereum roadmap, actually they are working on this. So if you've heard of dank sharding, this is basically data sharding. And the way they do it is that they say, okay, well, we can't have the layer 1 of Ethereum host terabytes of data. That just doesn't scale. You end up with Solana where, the Solana blockchain cannot be stored on a single machine. It's just not possible. So to avoid this, basically they want to have the nodes running Ethereum store the data, but not store it on chain, and then have a data availability proof. So you can ask the node, prove that you own this data. And they create a cryptographic proof that they can only create if they actually are storing the data. And so given that our chain is optimized around data unavailability, it also makes sense for us to be optimizing for this kind of data availability proof that live off chain. Yeah, so these are just a few things that I think we can do to improve. And then transaction prioritization is a must for any kind of DeFi application, including rollups.
Yeah, Seba, so DC Spark, you guys are very successful at building the next thing that's needed. For example, your Flint wallet nailed it. And
The serialization
How-
lib nailed
how do
it.
you guys do it?
You,
I mean,
you
do you
nailed
look at what's the next most painful thing? What's stopping me from building out the next greatest user experience? And then you try to figure out how do I solve that?
Well, the main thing that's a blocker on our side is 1, people, and 2, funding. Obviously, hiring in the blockchain space is very hard, as everybody here who runs a company knows.
Yeah.
The other thing is that we actually lose money on every Catalyst proposal we make. And this is fine for now because, the way we fund our company was going to venture capital and saying, we want to basically create a company that just builds infrastructure, builds ecosystems. And we think that the continued growth of treasuries will make this kind of company viable in the future, even though it's not viable now. And so we had people kind of pitch into this vision we have. So we're lucky to be in a position to be able to kind of build, technology needed to bring Cardano to the next level at a loss, which is not something that, every group can afford to do, which is why I think we've been innovating a lot of stuff like Pima, which I think is really innovative. Flint has some cool stuff, especially on the tooling side, and Milkom is also doing a bunch of stuff. But we're able to do this because we've been in the crypto ecosystem for years, and we have a lot of connections. We're able to find people to pitch into our vision. But the reality is DC Spark, Milkom, Pima together, these 3 companies that I help run, together we've been allocated total so far of 0.0001% of the total market cap of Cardano to build all these technologies. And given the market cap of Cardano, this is like 1.5 million, somewhere around that range. But no company would be willing to take on like the entire development of a blockchain for such a small allocation. And I understand that we're not trying to make DC Spark like the builder of Cardano. That's not how it works. It's a decentralized ecosystem, and everybody should be involved, and we should get more companies. But also at the same time, like this is the kind of background for why we've been able to do this, because one, we managed to get funding through our connections, and 2, we're passionate enough to kind of do this for Cardano, despite the fact we could get a significantly higher token allocation on a lot of other blockchains.
Yeah, and that's interesting, Seba. I kind of wanted to take a less technical turn with you on where you found a gap as well. I find very interesting the proposal that you have in Catalyst this round, right? I know you've talked about it a little bit before in some other spaces, but if you can kind of share with everybody here as well, you guys are actually asking Catalyst to fund a loan that you plan to pay back, right?
Yeah, so the main thing that we've been focused on at DC Spark and Milkom and Pima is all about trying to build companies that are incentivized with the layer 1. Historically, this is impossible to do. If you try and build a company incentivized with the success of like Microsoft, 1, Microsoft doesn't give a fuck about you. 2, like, you're not building a company to make Microsoft succeed. You're just using their technology. But blockchain allows us to build a company that's aligned with the success of layer 1. And our goal is really to try and think about how can we make products that both build a sustainable company while also being incentives aligned with the layer 1. So that's why for Milkom, you may have heard me talk about projective rollups, which is a technology that we don't talk about publicly too much because we don't want other people to snipe our idea. But basically, it's a way to basically build layer 2s, for example, for Cardano, where you can come with a Slate developer, deploy your app on Milkamita, and your app references smart contracts in the layer 1 of Cardano. So basically, they could access, an Oracle on layer 1. They could access, for example, SundaeSwap's data on layer 1 and project that onto layer 2 and access that from layer 2, which means that you can get your project started in layer 2, build a user base, get involved with the technology you're familiar with, and then your next step for user adoption is to go to layer 1, where you have access to this data as well that you're already used to accessing and access to more users. So this is the kind of technology we're interested in. Also why for Flint Wallet, we built almost all of our tooling open source. Also why for Paima, it's kind of using some technology similar to Milkamita. And so the entire game is on-chain. There's no AWS server or anything like that. So we're trying to build stuff as incentive aligned as possible with layer 1. Now, obviously, that involves a financial component as well, right? Because the one thing is to make the product incentive aligned. The other thing is to make the finance incentive aligned. And so we want to ideally have it so that the success of TC Spark is the success of Cardano, the success of Milkamita is the success of Cardano, the success of Paima is the success of Cardano. And it's hard to do this if we are taking funds from Cardano through Catalyst and other means that may come in the future. And so DC Spark is kind of hard to monetize because DC Spark is not a product, it's a company, which is why in our Catalyst proposal, we're asking for a loan. In an ideal world, this would be a loan in exchange for equity, but unfortunately, US regulations, as you know, make that impossible. So instead, we're doing a loan that we're paying back with interest. And for Milkamita, our plan is that we're currently working on liquid staking, so you can keep earning ADA rewards while using the layer 2. And part of the layer 2 staking rewards would be donated to Catalyst. So we're trying to think of these ways to basically get funds back to Catalyst. The problem, of course, is that right now Catalyst has no way of accepting funds. And even if it had a way of accepting funds, there'd be no way to decide what to do with the funds it receives.
Interesting challenges. It's finding gaps not only in the front end there, but now gaps in the back end as well for Catalyst, which we've found. Admittedly, we've all found a few of those over the last little bit here. That's definitely another area of opportunity for all of us as a community to start voicing how we're going to help improve the interoperability of the Catalyst fund. I mean, what you're offering is an incredible opportunity for the chain. This is something that if we figure it out well, it's a different means of coming at Catalyst funding that could be very useful for better established companies where there's a real possibility. You can look at the revenue and right now, we're in a bear market, right? So we're all facing it. We're all trying to get from now to higher revenue again, with every possible block and roadblock and challenge in front of us, dodging and jiving things, keeping people paid, keeping them working in the chain. And that's a challenge in and of itself, just that one thing. If there were room in the Catalyst, treasury to where companies that were successful in moving along would maybe had a small revenue gap that they needed to fill and could do it in a loan format, that'd be an amazing way, to extend the usability of the treasury and keeping the community running. So today we're talking Mind the Gap, and it's all the gaps that we can find as we are in our entrepreneurship journey here on the blockchain. It's an open forum discussion today, so feel free to chime in, anybody that has information they'd like to share. But Rick, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you there.
No, that's okay. I was talking enough. I'll wait and see if somebody else wants to go. But, in the meantime, I can mention that. So there's capability gaps, right? You want to see what are we trying to build? This ecosystem that can be used by hundreds of millions of people. And what are the pieces that are missing that need to get us there? And how do we build those out? And when you're working your way there, Sebastian articulated it very well. You run into other kinds of gaps. Those are not the system gaps. The systemic gaps are the user interface and the blockchain throughput. Whether it's layer 1 or layer 2, it's just throughput. What happens when those millions of users start using it? The data has to be available. The data has to get out there. But then once you get in the trenches, where we're all at, we realize, wow, there's other gaps. The missing, well, you need funding. You need money. Guess what? There's VC people out there who will fund you. VC money is a good thing. I notice people seemed a little tepid about it. If used correctly, used well, right, is VC money can help. It's not exclusive to Catalyst. Catalyst money is a good thing. VC money is also a good thing. They have their trade-offs. There's pros and cons to each. Okay? Some might be easier to get, but you got to pay it back. Other ones are a little bit harder to get, but you don't have to pay it back. And then there's human resource gaps. And you say, wow, I need a developer that does this, and I need a developer that does that. And then you find one. Or you might say, wow, I have developers that can code in Rust, or I have developers that can code in Python and JavaScript and React, but I don't have anything to build that on. And there's another gap in the system where you're trying to get the capability from your blockchain to high throughput to millions of users. That's where you want to build. All right, who else? Anyone got a story? I liked Pi's story earlier, and Sebastian. Who else has got something you're building out here, something Cardano needs? You've got enough work done already, you're willing to share it. And a lot of times people are hesitant because they'll think, well, I don't want to tell them my ideas because then they'll build it. I understand fully.
I have some ideas. Like lots of things were just mentioned, user experience, for example. And well, I'm like, okay, here's an idea. There's already elements of the user experience that can be reused. Like for a wallet, for example, if we're talking about like a browser extension wallet, every time like I want to swap anything on, say, a Muesli swap, my Eternal wallet pops up, and I need to paste the password, the payment password. Well, why do I need to do that? It's inconvenient. Like at least this could be replaced with say a Face ID or like a fingerprint. So that's one element. Another element is that, okay, so like these dApps are not available on my iPhone. Oh, not yet. Like for example, there's Eternal Wallet mode where it can function as a web app. So I can theoretically load it up in Safari on my iPhone, but actually I cannot mint ADA handles because of some stupid errors there. So okay, but there's technology already for that. There's browser extensions on Safari on iOS. And what if a browser extension could actually utilize Face ID on iPhone? There you go. Yeah, I would absolutely start building that, but there's a million wallets already, and I guess if we could have a Flint wallet browser extension on Safari on iOS, that would help.
Well, you can download the iOS native app, which does have a dApp browser built in, and it should work on ADA handle.
Well, sure.
So
yeah,
I'm actually testing
that browser.
while you're saying it, so I'm about to swap one ADA
Yeah, but
for 3 million
wait a
Hosky.
second. That browser, it has a limited set of dApps. But I just want to use my
for
browser.
Eternal, yes. For Eternal, yes. For Flint, no.
For Flint,
for
no.
Flint, it should work
I'm
with
actually
everything.
doing it while you guys are talking. I'm about to make a
Right.
swap.
Yeah,
Okay,
Flint seems to have
but
just
user-
a pure browser.
But hey, wait a minute. A user experience on mobile. If somebody sends me a link, or I see a link on a website, like I should know to like start up Flint and then do the dance, right? I want to do it within the browser I'm already using. And if I have Flint already installed, I do have it installed. the only thing missing is the browser extension for Safari, which Flint, I'm sure, can install, get installed on the next upgrade.
Yeah,
because
so
it's already
for
approved.
connecting to browsers, what we're doing is deep links. So basically, you'd have a link on the browser page. So when you open it, it'll open up the Flint wallet, and then you sign with Flint, and then it brings you back to your browser. So we have that under QA, hopefully released within the next week. And we are working on biometrics as well, which is currently going through code review.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Sign me in.
Yeah, because I had to use two hands. I had to type in my password. But everything else,
That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable.
Yeah, we're working on a lot of stuff.
Beta.
So you're
Yeah,
going
we're working on a lot of
deeply-
stuff. We're losing money on this, but we are working anyway.
Yeah. So your method, that's how are you able to do that? Is that only on iOS, or can you do that on Android as well? Can that deep linking work on Android as well?
Yeah, it's going to work on Android as well.
It will. Excellent.
Yeah, it's not released yet, but it's pending QA.
Excellent. All right. Well,
Yeah, I mean, so the reason we're spending so much time on Flint, even though it's kind of built as a loss, is because when Flint drives ideas for Catalyst proposals in the future, right? Like this cart proposal is something we came up with through Flint. This Wall Connect proposal is something we came up through our work for Flint. If you look at DC Spark proposals, quite a lot of them are stuff that we wanted for Flint, realized nobody has built it yet, so we just built it. So that's part of the thing. And the other thing is to address Pi's point, which is that we're building Milkamita as a layer 2 solution for Cardano eventually. And what we really want to avoid is people having to switch between networks, like Pi described. And so Flint, it was architectured in a way such that we can have the layer 2 and the layer 1 both look the same from a user perspective. Fortunately, we haven't been able to release support for this yet because we've been too busy building out core Cardano tooling. And we're always like, oh, we need to build this, but to build this first, we need an efficient backend. Okay, we'll need to spend 4 months on Carp and this kind of stuff, but we'll get there eventually.
So you mean you've got more things to develop than people to develop them? I have no idea what that problem's like. Never experienced that before.
Yeah, but that's a great example, Sebastian, because you're saying I'm trying to build something, but the core technology doesn't support it. Therefore, now I have to build the core technology, and you're filling them in, and you're doing them open source. I did not realize Flint was an open source wallet.
So everything about Flint is open source except the UI.
Okay.
So all the backend, the tooling, all this open source. This is our kind of compromise because having the UI open source doesn't really help you, because if you're using like a Bluetooth like hardware wallet, the security of knowing the UI code versus using the hardware wallet is negligible. There's no security gain from seeing the UI source code if you're a hardware wallet user. And we want to contribute to open source, but also have some kind of competitive advantage to the open source technology we're building. So obviously we build all the technology, we build the documentation for it, but how to combine all this stuff together to make a great product is kind of something we try and keep as the secret sauce. So it's how we're trying to strike a balance.
Yeah, that's reasonable. I think it's very reasonable.
Yeah, there's kind of an attack vector there too, right? If you open source the whole UI, then somebody clones it, and you've got a dozen clones out there, and nobody knows it's the right one.
Yeah, which happened with Yoroi every 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
Right.
Excellent. Well, it's been a great conversation today, guys. I learned a lot from Pi and Seba. Appreciate you both coming today and sharing everything. And Ivan, thank you for your contributions as well. It's been a great day today.
Thanks for stopping by, Andrew, too. I think we should probably go review this and take a lot of these ideas and slap them on a board.
Yeah.
Some good stuff today.
Definitely. All right, guys. Well, thank you all for attending. Appreciate your time. We'll see you again next week. Next week's topic, while we're here, let me pull that up so we can share it because everybody's got to know. For next week, we are talking communication catastrophes. So join the DripDropz team as we talk about the conundrums of public communication in a transparent, permissionless economy. I wonder what we're talking about next week. All are
Oh, boy.
welcome to this open forum discussion. See y'all next week.